Earlier we've studied about reproduction, but that was in animals. So now we're going to just look at how reproduction takes place in plants. Some plants can reproduce asexually, some produce sexually, and some can produce both ways, asexually and sexually. So let's just look at the methods and the ways that plants can reproduce asexually. Now, first of all, when you realize about asexual reproduction, you're going to have, excuse me, you're going to have a portion of a plant develop into a new plant. And how is that development going to take place? By mitosis. So you have the same DNA that's going to be in the offspring as the parent, because it's just through mitosis. So it's the same DNA, and the only way you would have any changes would be through mutations. So asexual reproduction occurs when a portion of a plant develops into a new or a separate new plant that is genetically identical to the original or the parent plant. So it's important to know asexual reproduction produces identical offspring, unless a mutation. So there's little genetic variety. The genes are identical to its parents. And there's an example of some. There's some advantages to us in this asexual reproduction of plants. One is to have identical plants. So a person can take from one shrub, can make cuttings of that, and make enough shrubs to go line one side of his property or whatever. And all of those shrubs would be identical in DNA. Now, saving time is in relationship to growing something from a seed. If you take a cutting or whatever, that's going to take a lot less time than growing a plant from the seed. Now, it doesn't save time in that you have to wait, a long while for some things to mature. So a lot of people don't like that, having to wait for them to mature, so they'll just pay the money and go out to a nursery, plant nursery, and buy the full-grown shrubs and pay for them. Now, saving money would be if you just take one and buy one shrub and cut all the cuttings and use that one shrub to produce all the shrubs that you need. That would save you a lot of money than going out and having to buy 10 or whatever. There's some different kinds. Well, actually, there's just one. Vegetative reproduction is what some will refer to this as, and some will refer to it as just propagation. And it's vegetative propagation. But if you look in plant books and you look on the online, usually they just shorten it to propagating. And that's what they call the term. So these, you don't need to know different types of asexual reproduction. They're really the same. So vegetative propagation is this. You're growing a new plant from either using its stem, a stem part, a leaf, or a root. You use something other than seeds. Seeds are specifically sexual reproduction, not asexual. So you've got to get a plant other than by seeds. There's one type of vegetative propagation that is induced. When it's induced, that means it's forced, and man does it. So man is going to grow a new plant from a root, a stem, or a leaf, such as the people there. And I've done some of this propagating myself. Some are real easy to propagate. So vegetative propagation that is induced, you need to know these three types: cuttings, layering, and grafting. Cuttings and layering anybody can do simply. Grafting takes expertise. You've got to know about how to do that and about some of the parts of the plant. So a cutting is just what it says. You cut either a leaf, a root, or a stem, and it depends upon the plant. And not every plant can reproduce asexually. And not every plant can reproduce asexually by cuttings. So I just go and look online if it's a plant that I want to try to propagate and see if it's possible. And so cuttings, you just cut off the leaf, as you see in the lower left hand. That's begonias. You just cut off a leaf, put it in some soil, and give it the right temperature and moisture, and it will grow into a whole new plant. As you can see, some new leaves that are sprouting out there. Or you can take a plant, and I've done this a lot, like with my philodendron plant, and a piece of it breaks off. And so I stick that piece in water and let it sit there. And then all of a sudden, where it was broken off at a node, now remember a node is where a leaf was attached or is attached, it grows adventitious roots. Now we're going to talk about adventitious roots. I think that may be the next slide. But if you look at the spider plant in my room, all the little plantlets that have been there for a while have already started growing these adventitious roots. So what an adventitious root is, it's this special tissue that's either at the end of the stem, the end of a leaf, or in the root that allows it to undergo mitosis and create a new plant from it. So that it was instilled by God. So cuttings are only possible because of the ability of that plant being able to form adventitious roots. And of course that was built into their DNA. And you can see some of the adventitious roots coming there out of a node. It says when a yellow flowered head shrub is trimmed, a new shrub may be started by simply sticking a trimmed stem into the ground. So like when people shave and cut their and form their nice little shapes of their shrubs, take those pieces, put them into some soil, give it the right moisture, temperature, and eventually it will grow roots and develop into a whole new plant, a whole new shrub. Now layering is easy to do as well. There's actually a couple ways that you can layer. And so a branch is going to be exposed to soil. And that soil is going to be around a node. And where the node is, you leave the soil on there for a while. And where the node is, that's where the adventitious roots are going to grow. And then if it's in contact, it'll just grow into a new plant. Or it can be like forced by man afterwards and cut and then planted somewhere else or potted. Now vineyards use this method to quickly reproduce a desired variety of grapes because they're going to have the same genetic code. Here's some pictures showing you a way to layer where you can take and put soil by using a bag and put soil around a node, leave it there for a while, and eventually it will become roots. And then you can cut it. Here's another where they're cutting it, and what they're showing you down there in number 4 and number 3, you can take like a plant and take the stem and plant part of that stem in another pot, or if you have it on the ground, some people would take like dirt and put it over it and put a small stone or brick on it to force it to stay in contact with the dirt. And where that node is in contact with the dirt, it will grow the adventitious roots. Now grafting, remember, this is the one that takes the expertise because you got to know about the tissues and how to graft the specific tissues, because you have to have that xylem and phloem that can work. If you cut it off, then it's just going to die. So you've got to be connecting it so that xylem and phloem can be flowing. Their juices, their sap. The process of transplanting living tissue, this is a definition to know, from one plant to another. And they're showing you the one that is being planted into the other, that's called a scion. You don't need to know this for a quiz or a test. And the one that is being planted into is called the stalk. A lot of hybrid roses are done this way. They're used to propagate seedless plants, grapes, navel oranges. That's one of the common ways that grafting is used. But you can also see it in some of the plant nursery catalogs. You can actually, and this is an ad I got from online, where they have grafted. I think this is pretty cool because let's say you don't have a lot of space in your yard, but you want some different kinds of fruit. Well, trees take up a lot of space. So this West family in New South Wales, Austria, started grafting, and they have 4 different trees available that you can buy. And look at the differences. So for one, they call it the apricot, the stone fruit tree. They have apricots on it, peaches, plums, nectarines, and peachcots, all on one tree. So you plant one tree, you can get all that various fruit. How did they do that? Well, they went to an apricot tree and grafted a branch from it to the stalk. They took a peach tree, grafted it, plum tree, and so forth. They have a citrus tree with oranges, mandarines, lemons, limes, tangelos, and grapefruit. And then they have an apple tree which grows different types of apples, and a pear tree with different types of pears. So it's amazing what they can do. Now this slide you need to know for your quiz. These are the ones that occur in nature. God instilled it in them. It happens in nature. We don't need to have man involved in order for this to occur. So we're going to look, I'm going to show you some pictures, but what you need to know is the example for the type of plant that has an underground stolon. That's a mint. A rhizome, an example, are cattails. Good rhizome that you can see now are a lot of the irises that are blooming. Corms, gladioluses. A lot of gladioluses are used in flower arrangements. A very common one, a bulb, is an onion. You're eating a bulb, the onion part. Tubers, of course, are potatoes. The Irish potatoes have the tubers. And runners, you may be familiar with the runners on strawberries, and I think we also talked about this in class, the spider plant that I have. All those little plantlets are at the end of a runner. How did they form? All by mitosis. So here's some examples illustrating each one of these vegetative propagations that are natural. An underground stolon is actually a stem. We've studied rhizomes. I think that's ginger, a ginger root, which is really a rhizome, not a root. There's your irises on the right. Corms to me look like bulbs almost, but there's some differences inside. Bulbs, you're familiar with garlic and onion. Those are bulbs. But there's other plants that grow by bulbs. Tulip bulbs. And the potatoes. And there's strawberry plants, showing you the runners.